Welcome in to another episode of Betting the Pitch. I am your host, the real underscore G Warner, as I live check to make sure that my speakers are lined up, which of course they are not. But without further ado, we're here, we're live, we're going in 20 seconds. Sorry to waste that of your time. But this is the first episode of the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Had a couple days off with no football, but it is coming back. And it is coming back with a fury. On today's episode, I'm going to go through the first day, so all of Friday matches, and give you some ideas on who I want to play. Also look at the futures involved, and then I'll save Saturday's action for a subsequent episode coming up on Friday. I'll record it probably after the games end is my plan. But I figured I've been asked. Thank you for all the feedback. Comments on Twitter is mainly where I've been seeing it. But thank you for asking me to go a little bit deeper in these matches because a lot of people that are listening don't know what they're doing. And I appreciate that feedback. That's been very important for me to see, hear, all that sort of stuff. And I look forward to going a little bit deeper into these matches, especially because we only have so many remaining. And I think there's still some really good money-making opportunities in them. Whether you're listening on YouTube, I guess you'll be watching as well. Thanks for checking out this beautiful face. But please subscribe, leave a review, give as many, if you want to leave a comment or likes, I think subscribe is probably most important there. But same sort of thing goes for Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you could subscribe, leave a 5-star review. That'd be really helpful to get me to do more of these episodes because I think that's what a lot of people want. If you're on Twitter, hit that, smash that follow button, the real underscore G Warner. And all lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag. It's my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced juice is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description below to fund your account. And you can use the promo code GW50 to receive 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So now that you have extra money in your account, and we might as well get right into this whole thing. And the first match is going to be a doozy. I mean, all these matches are great. Pretty much, other than I think Morocco, who we'll talk about tomorrow, everyone else has been at these levels before and have been probably expected to do well in this tournament. I probably talked a little bit about kind of where these teams have gone and kind of how they've gone through this event. But the first match to talk about and the two that we're going to go through today are Croatia, Brazil, and the next is Argentina and the Netherlands. I'll start with the early match, and that is a 9 a.m. Central Time start here in Dallas, Texas. And that is Croatia taking on Brazil. In Qatar, certainly want to talk about the crowd. Croatia is a pretty small nation, especially compared to Brazil in population size. I think they'll also be pretty small in the crowd and the stands in Qatar because ultimately there's been so much canary yellow in the stands for all these Brazil matches. And I expect a lot of the country just took the month off planning to spend as much time as possible in the Middle East to watch them take home yet another Copa Mundial or World Cup. Current number right now is Croatia getting 1.25 goals. All the juice is right now on Brazil. And especially considering how popular Brazil are, you certainly could see that number climbing to 1.5 before kickoff. I think if you're interested in Croatia and want to back Croatia, I would wait. Worst case scenario, you're getting odds on 1.25 right now. Lose by a single goal, you win a half, and you get a little bit more than half your stake returned to you in profit, plus your full stake. That's pretty nice. Over under right now is 2.75 at -114. So most of the juice at Bet Online is on that under. And that would probably be the way that I lean for this one, though. As we saw in the last match with Brazil, backing any sort of under is a really, really scary proposition. From when I first saw these lines, I guess I might as well bring those up. This is going to be the 9th of December. So when I first, I guess, put these numbers out there, my number, I had Croatia only getting a single goal. So it's a little bit above what I was expecting. I mean, possibly because of the popularity of Brazil, and that all makes sense. But my over-under, I thought it would be closer to 2.5 than this 2.75. It's a little bit split in between. Number has come up from 2.5, which is what it I initially saw 2 3/4, went down to 2.5, came back to 2 3/4. It probably jockeys around that position, though I expect a lot of money to come in this match on Brazil, the favorite that everyone knows, that everyone expects to win this whole thing, and then also on the over, because I think that's what the public side would be in most sporting events out there across the world. I guess I might as well throw out the 2 advanced number, and I got Croatia. I'm going to refresh this to make sure that I didn't mess this up. But yeah, right now, Croatia are only plus 250 to advance, which is a little bit surprising to me because I feel like that was climbing and was a lot higher earlier. Let me see. Clearly, I have not updated my tracking as much as I saw. So it climbed up to 5-1. So this has basically been 4.25. So plus 425, $100 wins you 425, up to 450, up to 500. And literally today, there's been some buyback back on Croatia, back to that 450 number. And I'm not really sure that I see Croatia getting through this match and moving on to the semifinal, but I mean, not a lot of people expected a lot of them last World Cup or in any of these tournaments, really, because they're such a small nation. And I wouldn't sell them right away. I'll start with Brazil and try to address kind of who they are before I get the Croatian side. But and then still to come, Netherlands and Argentina, and I'll give a best bet end of show as well to pay everyone off for hanging around. When I look at the Brazilian team, I imagine that Alisson will still be in goal, even though Ederson is another great option at goalkeeper. Unless there's an injury, he was substituted early, but I think that was mainly based on the scoreline and that there was no chance that South Korea would come back. And then you have Eder Militao, who's been filling in at right back, who's a great player and certainly is a good center back for Real Madrid, but also can certainly play right back position. He seems pretty athletic. He's huge for a right back, but maybe that's a good thing for defending potentially corners, because there aren't going to be a lot of chances that I expect Croatia to take. But Marquinhos and Thiago Silva are probably the best center back combination that you could think of from Brazil. They know how to play together. Marquinhos, I think, might be the best central defender in the world. Thiago Silva has been that at that level, certainly is older, and probably that diminishes his I guess his ability. But and then Danilo on the other side is certainly very talented, can play center back as well, has done that for Juventus, but also has a little bit more attacking ability in him. Lucas Paqueta then as a midfielder is certainly a terrifying type individual because he's so talented. I'm not sure that's really come off for him just yet in West Ham in London, but he's a great creator and ultimately is very scary to see in the central defensive midfielder position almost. Though Casemiro probably will be the best at kind of playing in that hole between Thiago Silva and Marquinhos. I'm going to get into strategies and kind of what these teams are built for and what they want to do. And please give me feedback if you think I'm going too basic, but I'm just trying to address everything, especially because we have only 2 matches tomorrow. Up in front, and I'm just going over the starting lineup from the last match. There may be some changes, but I imagine you play the best you got in all these matches running up until the final. Rafinha on the right side is an awesome, incredible creator, great goal scorer, has shown, honestly, he hasn't had maybe as great of a season for Leeds so far, but was great, or excuse me, at Barcelona, but was so good at Leeds and really probably kept them in the Premier League. I don't think that's a wild suggestion to make. Neymar, who looked pretty healthy coming off an ankle injury that saw a pretty big swelling, but a lot of treatment, and ultimately he'll be out there in knockout rounds until he can't be. Vini Jr., Real Madrid, terrifying on the left wing, faster than everybody, and ultimately is just a terror to play against, unfortunately. And he's finally learned how to finish his chances, which was a big problem for him for a while. And up top, of course, for Richarlison, who has 2 of the better goals, one more of a team goal, but one of the best goals that he from a side volley. Incredible, really great scorer, and showed, honestly, when he played for the Brazilian national team or Olympic team at the Olympics and they won, he was awesome there. You could argue that it was against a lot of younger sides, but he's been awesome. And the nice part is he's kind of an afterthought in the Brazilian lineup with Neymar taking so much attention, as well as Vini Jr. That was the starting lineup for Brazil. Certainly could be some changes, but I'm not going to try to predict Chiche's mindset or style or strategy. I mean, it's amazing having Bruno Guimaraes on the bench and like not playing much in this tournament. And of course, Martinelli as well, who's done nothing but dominate for Arsenal so far in the English Premier League. In terms of strategy, Brazil play Jogo Bonito. They're essentially playing with as many attacking players as possible. I mean, that starting lineup against Korea was more, I think, defensive than a lot of people expected based on Militao playing at right back. But they have, I mean, he's a great goal scorer in his own right. And Thiago Silva plus Casemiro, who's a defensive midfielder, is one of the best goal scorers for Real Madrid and is especially great at breaking down defenses that have been playing really well. The back-breaking header from a corner kick or some sort of slice into the net like he did against Switzerland. And ultimately, there's just so much talent and so many goal scorers on the Brazilian national side that they are, I mean, they should be the favorites, and they are pretty big ones here. In terms of strategy, they are going to be on the front foot trying to score the whole time. I think that's exactly what you want to do as a favorite. You essentially want to play an up-tempo 4-3 match. It's a lot easier for Brazil to win than a 1-0, I think. And that's a correct strategy. And ultimately, that's, I think, the best way for Brazil to capitalize on being the favorite. And then I'll get to Croatia shortly, but I don't expect any of that strategy to change here just because they're in the quarterfinals. They don't really seem to play that conservatively, even if they take a lead, and that's ultimately a great thing because that's how Brazil jumps on people and makes it really hard to come back. I expect that same sort of mentality to be there. I feel like the players are pretty free. There's a lot of pressure on Brazil, that's for sure, but they don't seem to feel it when they're playing. Certainly, as each level of this competition increases, as will the stress and expectation, but they, I think, are in a great position right now. And based on that South Korea match, I did back the under in that one. Thought about Korea and under. I'm glad I only did one, though that didn't work out for anybody. Ultimately, when Vinny Jr. scores in the 7th minute because they collapse everyone in the middle, essentially trying to protect the goal, and he's left alone on the outside in the 7th minute, that was curtains pretty much at that point because Korea really were hoping to try to sit back and defend as much as they could for 80 minutes and then concede. That was probably the best case scenario for me with backing an under. But I also got to admit that part of my handicap was wrong in South Korea because they were not playing in a Japanese style, which to me served Japan so well in this competition. But they're, I guess, out at the same round as South Korea. But South Korea was a lot more aggressive. And they don't have as much talent clearly as Brazil, but they don't have as much talent as Croatia either, especially not in the midfield. Heung-min Son is an awesome player and is probably the only world-class player on the South Korea team, I think. If you look, there's plenty of good players. Like they have Kim from Napoli, who's been a revelation this season. But they have some other good players that are on good teams, that like names that I know and that you probably would know if you followed the top 5 leagues in European soccer, but ultimately not enough to try to play as aggressively as they did against Brazil. They got punished, and I feel like their manager kind of messed that up. Now I think where it's probably more valuable is to talk about Croatia, because that's my strongest lean in this matchup. Currently getting 1.25 goals, and I'll lead into why. So they're still trying to figure out who's going to score goals for them. And unfortunately, it's been hard on Croatia so far in this competition to get the ball in the back of the net. That wasn't necessarily a problem for them, I feel like, in their last World Cup run, but goalless against Morocco and Belgium, kind of holding on, thankfully, to Romelu Lukaku, or they might not have gone through as the runner-up in their group. 4 goals against the Canadian side, who just played really stupidly, I thought, and were just too aggressive and left themselves open even after taking a 1-0 lead and essentially putting them in great position to qualify. Despite an opening loss to Belgium, Canada just left the field open for Croatia. And the nice part is that Brazil is going to be going all out for goals. And I do think that helps Croatia a lot and helps a potentially sputtering offense that isn't exactly firing on all cylinders. And I think it's mainly because they can't figure out who to play at striker. Pekovic does not seem like an option that I really want. I think Andre Kramaric has shown in his career that he's awesome, but has had a really tough season with Hoffenheim in the German Bundesliga. And I don't know necessarily what this lineup's going to look like. Again, I'm not going to try to predict 11s, but I imagine it will be as similar as possible with Perisic, and then on the left wing, though he's capable of defending, and I think will be a very important piece in this matchup. But then also the many midfielders, unless Kovacic is suspended, but I don't think that he is. Kovacic, Brozovic, and Modric are basically going to be where Croatia tries to muddy up this game by possessing the ball as much as possible. There's going to be a lot of quick breaks from Brazil. They're going to press really intently on the back line of Croatia. And I got to highlight Joseph Goriol, who's seemingly going to move from Red Bull Leipzig, if not in the January transfer window or whatever that time frame will be because of this World Cup. If not then, probably in the summer. He's been talked about so glowingly on the United States broadcast of the World Cup, and he's really delivered and played really well and has made some incredible tackles to kind of save situations. And honestly, one of the many opportunities that Lukaku might have missed was a pretty wide open net that he would have scored, I think, if Guardiola wasn't there to defend. He's going to be under a lot of pressure, as is Dejan Lovren, who I think a lot of people would know from Liverpool and honestly his runs with Croatia. He's going to have a lot of trouble with Brazil because he's older, and I honestly wonder if they might even go with a little bit more experience and bring in Domagoj Vida, who ultimately was there, the blonde ponytail, hard to forget, also from Croatia's run. There's a lot of talent that is still here, players that we know, which does make me a little nervous that they're over the hill. But they're in the quarterfinals of the World Cup with one of the smallest populations, so good for them. On the wings, or I guess the fullbacks, we have Juranovic, who I think plays for Celtic. He's been pretty good in this tournament, I got to say, and has been more creative than I was expecting. Also, Baudersic on the other side kind of had a tough time against Japan, I got to say. We'll see what his status will be and what his story will be in this match against Brazil. But now I guess it's time probably to get to the strategy for Croatia. So their midfield is their best spot. I think it's pretty much unrivaled by anyone in the world based on putting out Kovacic, Brozovic, and Modric. They are incredible players. I saw this team live, Croatia, in Vienna and Wien in September in the last match of their Nations League campaign against Austria. And I'm trying not to overreact to that or let that blind me too much, but I was so impressed by Luka Modric in that match and his ability to find passes. He's not young. I think he's 37 years old. There's concerns certainly about his health, age, all those sort of things in this matchup. I imagine he's going to give everything he's got because this might be his last World Cup, though wouldn't be shocked if it wasn't. But he came off a little bit early against Japan, which is a little surprising to me because I figured you'd want him to be in the penalty kicks. But ultimately, these bets are all graded at the end of 90 minutes plus stoppage time. So we're trying to get as many minutes as possible from these old legs. And then once it goes to extra time, you would have already won your Croatia bet. And ultimately, you're in great shape because I think Croatia is just trying to get to extra time and maybe the penalties if they can't kind of steal a win during regulation. With that said, I think it affects and impacts the Croatian strategy in this matchup. Their manager's been around for a long time. Zlatko Dalic, easy for Americans to pronounce. Unfortunately, it's not. But I think we can trust what he will do, and will do the same that he did years ago. And that's trying to use his midfield to get to that World Cup final where they lost to France. I believe that was in Russia. But they are really talented there. And then they have goal scoring threats. Even Perisic on the left wing with his cutback passes to the back post. Everyone should know it's coming, but it's really hard to think about that as you're panicked running backwards or running towards your own goal. And that's, I think, the dream scenario for Croatia and Croatia backers in this matchup, is to try to get as many open field situations where Modric or one of the other central midfielders or just midfield line essentially is trying to feed these wings in. And I think Perisic is the way to go on the left side. Get him on his own and have him cut something back into the box, or most likely float something back post for a header into the goal. I think they're going to have chances of that because Brazil don't fear anyone. They are going to be as aggressive as they can be, as aggressive as any team in this World Cup. And I think while Canada doesn't have anywhere near the talent as Brazil, I do feel like that should give Croatia some idea of how they're going to score goals in this matchup. They put up 4 in that one. I'm certainly not expecting that here. But I do think that they're going to be very threatening. And I don't know that Brazil is going to be pragmatic enough to say, okay, we're going to hold Eder Militao back to kind of hang back there and try to limit the Croatian counterattack. If they do, I think that's especially good for a Croatia bet, because you want to pretty much keep as few attackers in your box or around your 18-yard box area. And so the more defenders that are on the pitch for Brazil, or the more players that are not going all out for offense, I think that's great for Croatia, +1.25, maybe +1.5 before this kicks off, and also for the under 2 3/4. Here's why I like Croatia in this matchup. I think that they are going to be able to control the ball in the midfield to a decent degree. I don't think they're going to win the possession battle, because I think ultimately they're going to play with a defensive focus. But I think that they have a really, really polished side that, I mean, I'm not really even sure who in the world. Brazil is the favorite to win this tournament, best team in the world, most likely, but they're not perfect. And I feel like they have some gaps in the midfield that maybe haven't been a problem for them so far. South Korea, one of the worst teams to get through, besides, I guess, Australia probably, was a big deal for them to catch them in their draw. Very fortunate there. But Brazil ultimately got through a pretty great schedule or a group with Switzerland, who are good, but as we saw against Portugal, have some problems. Serbia, who just doesn't really defend much and tried to defend and really did really well for a long time. And then Brazil with playing backups, nothing that they needed from that Cameroon match. So I feel like until last match, we hadn't seen Brazil score a lot of goals. So that makes anything over 1 even a little bit more interesting to me. But I think especially in this setup, where I don't expect Brazil to be overrun by the Croatian midfield, but I do think Croatia will have some good opportunities to try to stick a knife in and like basically against the run of play, try to nick a goal, score a goal, take a lead potentially. I think if Croatia score the first goal, they're in really good shape to cover the spread and potentially even win the match. But I also don't think that they're dead, because they can cut this to a 2-1 match or something like that, even if they're 2 goals behind. Wouldn't be great for the total, because that probably sends it at least halfway over based on the current 2 3/4. But I think it would basically leave the back door open for Croatia to try to make it close late, make Brazil kind of sweat, run the clock out, and you'll end up taking home some money, potentially a full unit, if this does climb to 1.5. I'm interested in Croatia. I feel like that midfield is the big reason for it. I also feel like there is some goals in their front line. We haven't seen a lot of it yet, but I feel like that's more interesting to me as an underdog, because the possibilities are there. Whereas if they're a favorite, it's really great to bet against, because you can't really trust them to score. Goalkeeper Livakovic was great in the shootout. I'm not sure that he's going to matter too much, and he's had some shaky moments in this tournament so far. I lean to Croatia getting 1.25. I lean to under 2 3/4 as well, but I'm not sure that I want to double up with a side and under, essentially going against the favorite in Brazil, because they are so strong. Again, I guess to advance, I mean, Brazil at 1-6 or -600 to get through is a pretty steep price considering who they're facing. Croatia at 40, I mean, 4.5 to 1 is interesting to me. I'm not sure that it'll make my card or really come anywhere close, because I'm not trying to lose much money betting against Brazil, but I did back Switzerland against them for a push, which could have been a win for the early subscribers to my package. You probably got in there and got a win, and good for you. But I feel like also I've seen Croatia pretty well in this tournament, having bet the under and Japan in their last round. So I feel pretty good about them coming into this quarterfinal round. So now we'll move to a 1 o'clock starting time in the Netherlands. Well, I guess it's not in the Netherlands. It's in Qatar, and it is Netherlands against Argentina. Currently, Netherlands a 1/4 goal underdog with most of the juice in Argentina. The over/under is 2 with all the juice on over. Looks like this one's trending towards 2.25, but the 2.25 under is pretty juice at the moment. Again, same sort of story. Messi is so popular. Argentina took some of the most bets, I think, to win the entire competition. At least it seemed like they were, I think, a 12 to 1 or 12 to 1 to win the whole thing. Everyone's an underdog in the World Cup, essentially, because everyone's more than plus money. But Argentina, I think, we're 12 to 1 and came all the way down to 5 or even less than that to 1 to win the World Cup. Maybe because of their success in the Copa America, especially when they beat Brazil. They've had a great run. Messi's looked great and didn't get hurt. Maybe that was a big concern also for some of the bettors out there. But I think Argentina's gotten a lot of respect. And I'm not going to say it's not deserved, but I do feel like they have been really talented, and a lot of it's because of who they've played. Mexico, probably the worst Mexican national team we've seen in forever, because they didn't even get out of the group stage for the first time since I think it was up to 32 teams. They couldn't score any goals, and that doesn't really threaten Argentina, though Argentina did struggle with Mexico for a lot of it. But Mexico were really trying to defend the whole time, so that speaks to a little bit. But took a messy goal and then a beautiful shot from the corner of the box, top bins, that was impossible to save. But ultimately, Argentina's goal scoring has not really been there as much as I think a lot of people would have expected. Then they get Australia, the worst team by far, I think, to move on. So sorry to South Korea, but Australia definitely the worst to get through. But then Saudi Arabia, that loss from a 1-0 victory on an early penalty, that certainly threw us off the scent a little bit, though Argentina were always picked by everyone to get through. And then facing Poland, ultimately Poland is not a good soccer team. They have a really good goal scorer who can't seem to find goals on the national team. And just from where I sit with Poland, I just don't know that they were really even a test for Argentina. I do think the Dutch will be a test for Argentina, and that's a little bit different here. I'm going to start with Argentina since they are the favored team. Excuse me. I don't know why it says D Martinez on Twitter, but excuse me, on Google and the lineup page. Anyway, Emiliano Martinez. What the heck is going on here? Yeah. He's a great goalkeeper, but has had kind of a shady or sloppy year so far this year for Aston Villa. Maybe the concussion that he took didn't help, but I'm not sure I'm fully in love with him. Nahuel Molina has not been very good for Atletico Madrid and certainly has red cards in him like everyone on that team. Christian Romero, Nico Otamendi are a decent center back pairing, but Otamendi is long gone from Manchester City and is kind of hiding in the Portuguese league, playing for Benfica, and he's been pretty good there, but ultimately not and I feel like the kind of the setback or the limitation for a lot of these South American teams are their defense. And I think that that's certainly a problem for Argentina. Acuna as left back is certainly great and will be up the field a lot, but I also think he will be exposed for going too much up the pitch, as we've seen that with Sevilla a lot this season. Rodrigo de Paul is a great central midfielder, but also loves to get forward. I don't have a ton of a read on Fernandez in the middle, but McAllister is a forward essentially for Argentina. And maybe this lineup was very aggressive and attacking because they were facing a team like Australia, and they knew that if they can get 2 goals, they likely would win. But Julian Alvarez has been awesome. He's scary, as well as, of course, Leo Messi. And then ultimately, I'm curious if Papu Gomez is going to stay in the starting lineup or if that will be back to Angel Di Maria. This has always been a Messi only team. And that's been the real problem for Argentina in trying to win these tournaments and advance in these tournaments. Julian Alvarez has been awesome for Manchester City, filling in for Erling Haaland and also just coming onto the pitch, substituting for him as well when he wasn't injured and scoring a ton of goals. He's a scary player. And as is Lionel Messi, because unfortunately any foul near the box is terrifying. Anytime he gets the ball at his feet, he can set up his teammates, though ultimately the teammates besides Alvarez, there are not a lot of goals in this team ultimately. So that does make me feel a little bit better that potentially Netherlands have a little bit better of a chance here. When I move over to the Dutch side, they were in a group that was one of the easier out there, though Senegal is decent, Ecuador also decent, but really played defensively. And then Qatar, probably worst team in the competition. Australia, the worst that actually made it through. Netherlands did a little weird stuff, starting Nulpert in goal. That was weird. Derek Ray pointed that out, not even taking Mark Flecken, who was potentially going to start for him, though maybe that followed the U.S. style to not even bring your 1B to your 1A for not wanting to threaten the starting keeper or make him look over his shoulder. I don't buy that. I'm not sure that Nulpert has been very good in this competition so far, but he did get to face the United States, and there really wasn't much because they can't score goals. We can't score goals, unfortunately. Julian Timber is good. Virgil van Dijk, one of the scariest players to go against, and is so physical and is so big on the soccer pitch, especially when he walks off at halftime against like these 5'7" guys. I think he will. He doesn't really fit in a defensive role against Lionel Messi because he's not as fleet of foot, especially after the knee injury. But he's going to be a big problem offensively for Netherlands, scoring goals off of corner kicks and set pieces. But also he'll be important to head the ball away from Argentina, and might even make Argentina kind of give up on the corner kicks and instead go for the short corners. You can certainly score from those, but I feel like there's higher XG from the corner kicks. Correct me if I'm wrong, math people out there, but I like just trying to make Argentina score from open play as much as possible because I think it's the hardest way to score. There's a lot of ways to mess things up, and ultimately that's kind of what I'm hoping for with any defense. Nathan Ake has shown that he's been pretty good in this competition. Was expensive for a reason, and Manchester City's been playing him plenty as well. So if Pep Guardiola thinks he's good enough, I think that there's plenty to believe in with that team, and ultimately that three center backs gives Denzel Dumfries the ability to play on the wing more an aggressive of position and to really run up the pitch as much as possible. He is likely to be matched up against Marcos Acuna, and I feel like I said earlier, that Acuna sometimes leaves his position a little bit too aggressively. I think that's a really great thing for Denzel Dumfries because once he's even close to even with you, he is leaving. And he is so fast that I don't really know that anyone on Argentina has the speed to keep up with him. Dorun has been a really great midfielder for the Dutch, really for Atalanta, and has been a staple, can play center back. And I don't think that the Netherlands are going to change their formation too much, but I do think that they might keep him lying a little bit deeper in the center midfield. Frankie de Jong, who I hope is not suspended for yellow cards. He has been, one of the best creators in all of European football. Barcelona has not really used him in that way, and really because they were trying to sell him, haven't used him much this season, and I think that's been a big problem for them and why they really didn't move on in Champions League. But Daley Blind, who scored a goal against the U.S., he's another kind of stout defender that's been there a long time. He certainly doesn't have the pace that Dumfries does, but is a really talented player. And Argentina and the Dutch are to me very similar in terms of talent. Davy Klaassen started in the kind of the central attacking midfielder, the 10 position, is a good creator. No, he's old, he's balding, like all those sort of things. So that's a Dutch thing with Arjen Robben from the past, but he's got some goals in him from outside the box and is a threat there. And then you get to the front with Cody Gakpo, who's making himself more and more money and really making PSV Eindhoven more and more money on the transfer market with all the goals he's scoring. And then it was really important to see Memphis Depay in the starting lineup because he is an awesome goal scorer, incredible penalty kick taker, and he's been injured, and they've been trying to work him into their lineup to get some goals and more threat up front. The Dutch and the Netherlands are not like second-class citizens in this matchup. The money is on Argentina right now. The odds or the juice is there. They're the favorite. They have Lionel Messi, and that certainly is better than anything that almost anyone else across this entire tournament can offer. It might be the most important player to any team because he is so awesome with that left foot from set pieces, especially, and certainly in the run of play. But I don't know that there's a ton of difference between these two teams. And ultimately, if there's a draw into 90 minutes, you win half your bet if you take Netherlands plus a quarter. The juice suggests that Argentina will get bet to a half of a goal, though it's not guaranteeing that right now. It's very juiced right now in the Netherlands plus 1/2. But I'm going to be out looking to see if the Dutch price comes up a little bit. I'm kind of thinking about this on the fly and trying to come up with reasoning because it's really, thank you for all you for tuning in, but it's a really nice thing for me to do to also talk out how I feel about these matchups because you just don't get that thinking inside your head or something like that. Talking it out is really nice. I think in terms of over under, seeing 2 is really low, which kind of speaks to the underdog because there's a correlated. Usually the underdog covers if there's a low scoring matchup. Or that's the best way for the underdog, or most likely way for an underdog to cover is in a low scoring match. Game in American sport, I guess, is where I originally picked it up. But when I look at Argentina at 2, it seems a little bit low for two teams that really want to get out and attack. That does limit my interest in the under, though I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on both these teams. There's pressure on everyone at this point in the competition. But I think from where I sit with Argentina is that they can get exposed by a Dutch attack. And let's not forget that this is one of Europe's best teams. Europe has the most countries in this tournament. I mean, certainly based on how many countries are in Europe and in that confederation, but there's a reason why they have so many bids and slots into this tournament. There's not a lot of defense on the Argentinian side, whereas I think there's some stalwarts and people that we can trust, like Virgil van Dijk for the Dutch. Now, I say that he might have a bad match, foul someone in the box, do something silly, but he's also one of the most mature defenders out there, and I think gets a little bit more respect from referees than maybe he deserves. There's a lot of threats here, and I just don't know that the Argentina defense is going to be good enough to keep the Dutch out of the net. And if they're not able to keep a clean sheet, then they're going to need 2 to beat your +1 bet on the Netherlands. And I feel like that's going to be pretty hard to see in this matchup. Certainly, if they get the first goal, then things might change, especially late in the match if the Netherlands are pushing forward. But I feel like I've talked myself farther and farther into the Netherlands, just talking to all of you. And thank you for tuning in. To give a 2 advanced number, way different than Croatia. Certainly spreads different, all those sort of things, but the Netherlands only +145, $100 wins you 145. Argentina -170. So this is seen as a pretty close matchup. Certainly hard to predict. Penalty kicks, I feel like that's a 50-50 proposition, but ultimately if you got +145 on a 50%, that's definitely plus EV. So you're doing well if you're back in the Netherlands and it gets to extra time. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Netherlands can even win this competition, they could win the whole competition. Having to get through Argentina and Brazil would be really tough back to back, or also Croatia if they somehow pull off an upset. But ultimately, I think they can certainly get through and win this match in regulation. But who knows in extra time, and who knows even less we know less in the penalty kicks. So I'm pretty interested in the Dutch. I don't know that under 2 is anywhere near my interest level at this point, but I guess we've reached the end of the show, considering we're just doing 2 matches today, in depth. Hopefully this is what everyone was clamoring for, and I say clamoring for in a good way. I appreciate it. Please clamor as much as you want. Slide in the DMs, at me as much as you want, @the_real_G Warner on Twitter. Stay tuned. Best bet's coming. Or I guess ultimate best bet, because there's only 2 matches here. So there we go. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please like, subscribe, give 5-star review. It really means a lot. Same thing. Please subscribe if you're on YouTube, because I got a long way to go until I can start making that a real business venture. But I guess my best bets are down to, I do like Croatia +1.25. I'm interested in this one getting 1.5. It's only -124 right now at Bet Online. So that's, more juice than I want to pay in this sport, because it makes it really hard to win the higher that juice is. But ultimately, I feel like that's a good sign that we might see a decent price on 1.5 before this kicks off. Under 2.75, I like in that matchup a little bit more, though I do feel like 2-1 is a fairly reasonable outcome here, and that would ultimately you'd win half a bet on Croatia and lose half a bet on the under. So, wouldn't be the worst thing. Certainly would be entertaining for a couple hours. Certainly have you on the edge of your seat for sure, if that's the way that finishes. But then when I look at the nightcap, the afternoon game here in the US, I like the Netherlands getting 1/4, and I lean to under, but I just don't even think that that's reasonable for me, or even close at 2. I don't even know at 2.25 if I like that either. Just to review my lines here, just so I'm not completely leaving this one astray. I expected a lower scoring matchup here. I thought 2.25 would come out, which seems like it might close there. So maybe I wasn't too far off, but I do think the Dutch have a really good chance here. So I like that 1/4 goal, but I think, as weird as it sounds, fading Brazil is really scary. I think my ultimate best bet for this show is going to have to be Croatia, though, because I feel like that midfield can really stymie and limit the Brazil attack. So they only have, let's say, 15 shots instead of 20. And that 5 difference could certainly mean 1 less XG if you add it all together, aggregated, or just a 1-0 final to Brazil that then makes Croatia cover half of their bet, because you get half with a 1.25. Or if this even goes to 1.5 before it closes, that'll win you a full unit. And I feel like that's something that's pretty realistic in the morning match for Croatia and Brazil, because every minute that goes by and Brazil's not ahead, they get more and more dangerous, or at least Croatia does get more and more dangerous on the counterattack. And it honestly makes it harder and harder for Brazil to cover that spread, plus even win the match in general. So I'm going to give my ultimate best bet, Croatia plus 1.25. Thanks for tuning in. Please let me know. Slide in the DMs at the real_G Warner on Twitter. If you feel like this is good use of your time, I hope so. Stay tuned for a little bit quicker of a version of the pregame podcast. We're going to go through all the matches there. Probably get some in-depth things, and I'm sure Mackenzie Rivers will give me some more things to think about in addition to some pronunciation issues. But check in for that as well. And then look forward to, I guess, the next betting the pitch, which will come out outlining the other two matches, France and England. And then who the heck is the other one playing? It is Morocco and Portugal. But thanks for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate all of you. The millions and millions of views that we're getting, not that many, but I appreciate it. And check the link below if you want. If you don't have a Bet Online account, go sign up and get some free money. That's it. That's this episode. 40 minutes in the books on 2 matches. Hopefully that gets you what you're looking for, and we'll talk soon.